Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day 3 of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region Annual Summit in Boise. We are really excited to have a day of transportation. And to kick it off, I'm going to invite up our MC for the morning, who has been our transportation co-chair for many years and is the director of Penware's Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. Bruce Agnew.
Good morning and welcome. Betts Myers, our deputy director, and Betts and I are going to talk about the Regional Accelerator. But I wanted to note that today, transportation with an emphasis on railroads, and tomorrow's session, the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit, are co-hosted by the city of Boise. And Bree in the mayor's office has been spectacular to work with. Betts, why don't we come on up and let's talk about the Regional Accelerator. Our panel this morning includes Karen Hedlund, the vice chair of the Surface Transportation Board. We were a little worried about Karen because she got held, no, we're going to do it, we'll bring you up in a second. She got held up in Denver last night and we were hoping she'd get here by 7 o'clock this morning. And we also have Andrew Neely, who's a senior vice president, federal government affairs for WSP. And interesting thing about Andrew, he and Alex Hergott, who will be your speaker at lunch today, both served on the Senate Commerce Committee and I think Environment and Public Works, but that was the committee in the Senate that had jurisdiction over the previous federal transportation bill that was passed in 2015 called the FAST Act. And now, of course, we have the IIJA that you'll hear about this morning and the IRA, but the FAST Act really kind of set policy for transportation, and it was a great bill. And then we also have, I believe via video, Mark Brer, who is a chief executive officer of the Techo Investment Corporation from the Northwest Territories. And unfortunately, Mark couldn't join us today, but we're really looking forward to talking about energy and utility corridors with the Northwest Territories and Indigenous people in Canada at our session at Whistler next year, July 20th to 24th. So mark it on your calendar. It's going to be a great session, and we're going to really get into the kind of the nexus of energy and transportation and corridors, and particularly with an emphasis on what British Columbia is doing in Saskatchewan, as well as Alberta, Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska in developing new routes, economic corridors, and Mark Brer is really the key person in that discussion, along with the MLA delegation here from Alberta. So the Regional Infrastructure Accelerator has been around for a year and a half. I'll let you handle that. And we were funded by the Build America Bureau, and we have several people, Carl and Sarah from the Build America Bureau here, our funders. And we are engaged in several projects, and Betts is going to go over those projects. But we're really excited about basically accelerating transportation and the nexus of clean energy and smart transportation in the Penware states. And we've got a great program, and today kind of epitomizes the essence of what we're trying to do, particularly what's going on with the federal transportation infrastructure bills, which are massive. Karen will get into that, but also how they can be used for corridors and gateways. And so we're very excited. Our sessions, concurrent sessions on railroads, we're delighted to have senior executives from BNSF and Union Pacific here to talk about agriculture and transporting agriculture from interior markets to global markets. We had a lot of discussion in the last couple of days about agriculture and the importance of food security and agricultural exports. And then we have a really kind of fun session this morning called Better Together, and how passenger and freight rail can work together to invest in our rail infrastructure, which is so important to our economy. And I'm particularly delighted we have Rob Padgett here, who is the director of the Capital Corridor Authority in California, which has done a magnificent job of kind of blending local connections, working with their host railroad, Union Pacific, and developing a really first-class rail system, passenger rail system from Sacramento to the Bay Area. So Let's talk about the accelerator.
Thanks, Bruce. Good morning, everybody. My name is Beth Meyer. I'm the Assistant Director for Pennware's Regional Infrastructure Accelerator Program. So as Bruce mentioned, this is a grant project from the U.S. Department of Transportation through their Build America Bureau, which is their finance office. Thank you. Pennware is one of 10 RIAs across the U.S., and we are the only multi-state and non-government RIA program, which means that we can be really nimble and we can do our best to try and address some of the issues that we're seeing across the US when it comes to implementing IIJA and other really critical pieces of legislation here. So over the past year, we've been working on 3 sort of categories of projects. We have drayage decarbonization for the trucks that serve the ports of Seattle and Tacoma, figuring out how can we help with innovative financing to move this technology forward. The second is high performance rail, which is what we're going to be talking about a lot today. And the third is developing this Build Northwest Center of Excellence so that we can identify ways that we can use public-private partnerships, like our Canadian colleagues, to move the needle on infrastructure projects and bring private investment into the picture so that we can move things forward and get things done. And we've had a lot of success over the past year. It's been really a great place to be and to work in. With our zero emission work, we have put on a really big conference earlier in April, which we're really excited to say resulted in some additional funding for the Electrical Joint Transportation Committee, our training center in Washington State, so that we can train more electricians, so that we can meet that demand for electricians as we start to build out EV infrastructure. And we've also developed this concept of zero emission commercial corridors, and how can we plan across state lines and across our states and through our corridors to prepare our cities and towns for the kind of infrastructure that we're going to need to decarbonize big trucks and buses, because it takes a lot more than it does to refuel a Tesla if you're talking about a bus. The second, under high performance rail, we were working with the city of Spokane Valley, Washington on a highway rail grade separation project out there. So that's eastern Washington, really close to the Idaho border, actually. So this is a really great safety project, and it had sort of languished for a couple of years, but it really got some momentum. We started working with their team last year, and they were successful in receiving a $24 million RAISE grant. And for our Canadians, RAISE money is really hard to come by. It's an incredibly oversubscribed program. So any project that receives that RAISE grant funding is a huge success story. So it's now primarily funded, and we're really excited to see that it's moving forward after being around for almost 25 years. And from there, we have spent the next couple months devoted to developing this concept of high performance rail. And then finally, we have been working to develop this RIA Center of Excellence. And we are the first RIA to have a website. We're one of the most active RIA programs. We've been putting on workshops. We did a lot of things at the Economic Leadership Forum, and all of the transportation work that we've done through the annual summit, including our work with the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit people, has been through the RIA. So we're really excited about what we've been doing and about where we're going to go, because there's some really great things we've planned for the horizon and that we're planning for Whistler in 2024. And then I think we actually have a welcome video from Senator Crapo for the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit folks.
Hi, I'm U.S. Senator Mike Crapo. Thank you for inviting me to speak with you as part of the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit. I hope your time in Boise will be a fruitful discussion of the importance of rail infrastructure to the Pacific Northwest economic region. Today, you will have the opportunity to discuss a number of issues related to the restoration, expansion, and enhancement of passenger rail services across the region. I understand the importance of having reliable public transportation available in rural areas, and have long supported the return of passenger rail service to southern Idaho. I will continue to engage with my colleagues and the administration to support the return of the Pioneer Line. Reinstating the Pioneer Line has many benefits for Idaho, to include connecting it with the national passenger rail system, adding travel options, and increasing mobility for citizens and enhancing economic and community development along the route. As conversations about the rail expansion continue, regional and local feedback is crucial to demonstrating the expansive need Idaho has for additional improvements and return of passenger rail service through Boise. Please continue engaging with members of Congress and our staff to highlight the many benefits passenger rail networks have to your communities. Thank you.
Okay, Karen, you want to come up, Andrew? And Mark will join us through video. Again, Karen Hedlund is the Vice Chair of the Surface Transportation Board, which is the independent federal agency that does economic regulation over the railroads. And a long and distinguished career, served as Chief Counsel for the Federal Highway Administration in the Obama administration, and also Chief Counsel and Deputy Administrator of Federal Railroad Administration. So it's rare we get somebody who is truly multimodal. And Karen has 30 years of legal experience in railroad and transportation. And interesting story. Karen splits her time, I think, between Colorado and Brooklyn, where she has a place overlooking the East River, the Manhattan skyline. Turns out that is the same building, maybe 2 floors down, where my daughter and son-in-law had their apartment. And so small world, we ran into each other. It was great. So, and Andrew, as I indicated, handles federal affairs for WSP, and WSP has been a longtime supporter of Pinware. We got together with some of Paula Hammond and some of the WSP folks last night for dinner. It was great to catch up. And they've been a big supporter of Pinware over the years, so we're delighted. Andrew, with his background in particular, working on various committees on the Hill in drafting this legislation, is in a unique position right now as an independent agency or independent consultant to tell us about the ins and outs and how to navigate the IIJA. So, and then we will have, I think, we'll have Mark Brer on. Mark is on. Okay. Mark, can you hear us?
I can, yes.
Okay. How's your time, Mark? Because we're going to have you speak after Karen makes the introductions.
No problem with time.
Okay. Thank you. Karen?
Thank you very much. Oh, this is on. I think first I should tell you a little bit about the STB, because frequently we are confused with another agency called the National Transportation Safety Board. The STB, the Surface Transportation Board, regulates the economic affairs of railroads. The National Transportation Safety Board regulates safety across all modes of transportation. So when a railroad falls into the Yellowstone River, that's not us. We don't have anything to do with that. But if, as a result, we can't get coal produced in the Powder River Basin to the export facilities on the west coast of British Columbia, that is a problem for us. So if you think about it that way, that's what we do. And we're going to start off with Mark. By way of introduction, Mark, I was thinking about what I should say today, and since I was totally unprepared, I decided I would just tell you about what I did yesterday. Yesterday, I was in Minnesota, where it's 60 degrees. And I was a place called Twin Harbors, which is about 20 miles north of Duluth. And I went there to see the Canadian National Railway facilities, where they take all the iron and taconite from the Mesabi Range in northern Minnesota and load it onto these huge 1,000-foot-long lake freighters and haul that iron ore down to Gary, Indiana, and to Detroit, and ultimately it gets to Pittsburgh. And there's a little bit of history. I'm kind of a history wonk, people know that. So The iron in the Mesabi Range was first discovered in the 1880s, 1890s. I should say first discovered by white men in the 1880s and 1890s. They were up there, and the Native Americans up there were using iron pots and various kinds of iron implements. And they said, well, where'd you get this stuff? Did you import it from France? And they said, no, it's that red stuff up on those Vermilion Hills up there, and we heat it up and melt it down, and we make iron pots. Their eyes got very big, and they went up and they found the largest iron ore deposits in North America. What was the first thing they did? They built a railroad to get it out of there. Brought the railroad over to Duluth and to Twin Harbors, put it on ships, and got it through the Great Lakes and down to their big customer, Andrew Carnegie, in Pittsburgh. Ultimately, Andrew Carnegie wound up buying the ships and buying the iron ore and buying the railroad, and that became U.S. Steel. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Mark and have us hear about economic development in one of the most remote regions of North America, but increasingly one of the more important regions of North America. So Mark?
Thank you. I apologize for not being able to be there. I just had circumstances didn't quite work out. So I did send a set of slides down. I'm not sure how we'll be controlling that, whether it's someone down there will be controlling it, but I wanted to give a little bit of background on the Clecho and the Northwest Territories and the region. So well, that's hopefully being queued up. The just to give you an idea, the Clecho is a First Nation in the Northwest Territories, which is a self-governing First Nation, which means it does have its own government inside the government of Canada. And it's a if you want to go ahead to the next slide, I'll give a bit of background on what that looks like. So just to give you an idea, and not a lot of people know about Northwest Territories in Canada as well as everywhere. So the population of Canada is around 38 million. Northwest Territories is 45,000. Yellowknife itself is about 21,000. That was the latest census in 2023. So roughly half of Northwest Territories is in one city north of Great Slave Lake. And it's interesting you're talking about rail. There's no rail service into Yellowknife. There's a rail service only to below Great Slave Lake, which is that lake on the bottom portion of the red diagram, which is Hay River. So the Clecho make up about 4,500 in total population around the world. Most of that is in the Clecho region and in Yellowknife. So if you want to jump ahead, the area, as I was saying, is around 39,000 square kilometers of self-government, which is that blue area between Great Slave and Great Bear Lakes, made up of 4 communities, 60,000 kilometers of shared territory, and then about 110 kilometers west, Betchko, which is the unofficial capital, west of Yellowknife. So made up of Wati, Gamity, Wekwati, and Betchko is made up of 3 communities within it. So go ahead. As I said, it was self-government. The economic arm, which is the Clecho Investment Corporation, of which I am the CEO, we have 15 wholly owned businesses and around 16 joint ventures. That does change quite often. We do bring more in and stop others depending on projects. And I won't go through all the pieces, but we have everything from construction to motels, retail operations, property, real estate, leasing programs. So we are quite a large indigenous economic development firm in the territory. But you'll understand on the size of the territory what that really means. Go ahead. And I just put a couple stats in here. About 60% or 64% of our employment is Clicho individuals. So these stats are a couple months old, but it runs around 64 to 67%, which is terrific. We have about 350 employees who are direct employees, not including joint ventures. So that's terrific for us, and it's growing, and we're trying to improve that all the time. And we have, from all 4 communities. We do, if you notice, our gender employment is around 25% female. A lot of our industries have driven that, heavy in the past, especially on mining and construction. So that is changing. It is moving up, but slowly. Go ahead. And then again, give you a perspective of, 48,000 is the, kind of the number we always use for population of Northwest Territories. And, the stadium in Boise there holds 37,000. So I always use the Sky Dome in Toronto as my example, that the entire population of Northwest Territories could fit in Sky Dome. So the question really becomes, who pays for infrastructure? The government of Canada. Northwest Territories doesn't have a lot of money. They get almost all their money from the government of Canada. Or do we get into public-private partnerships, which I will talk about in a second. So go ahead. And I just kind of put 3 things down here. 3 of the key areas for infrastructure. There's many, obviously, infrastructure issues up in the north, but these 3 areas: current energy issues, alternate energy, transportation. I talked about rail, and I'll talk about roads in a second, and internet connectivity. Go ahead. So if you look at it, there's 33 communities in the Northwest Territories, 33 remote communities who run mainly on diesel. So there's obviously the noise factor, there's greenhouse gases, diesel transported across winter roads, which is primarily ice, and the expense. And I put down some rough costs here, in Toronto, 7.4 cents to 15 cents per kilowatt hour. And wow, do people complain. But when you look at Betchico, which is not necessarily that remote a community, 30.6 to 35.6 cents per kilowatt hour. So there's some real, real cost, problems with energy in the north as well, which you can imagine. Go ahead. So, alternate energies, we're looking at things all the time, especially as we go forward. Wind turbine, solar, and again, winter, quite dark. We only are in Yellowknife, in the Yellowknife area, only have about 5 or 6 hours of sunlight a day. And as you go further north to some of the remote communities, it's far less. But pellet boiling, pellet burning, run-of-river projects. We're looking at, everything out there, nuclear and hydrogen and all kinds of things. So jump ahead. And we own, as one of the projects we have, we own a portion of a dam. But the feed from that dam does not feed the communities directly. It feeds Yellowknife. So we are working on a transmission line to one of the second biggest community right now. But again, very expensive based on where we're going. It's a 37 kilometer line that will cost us about $60 million to put in. Go ahead. Transportation, I mentioned one road in and out of Yellowknife. There's a bridge on that road, and there's a picture of it there, called Frank Channel Bridge, which is failing. And we're in the process of working with a partner, with Kiewit is our partner, on rebuilding that bridge, or building a new bridge next to it and then taking that one down. But most of the communities are winter road, ice roads through portages, very expensive to build, difficult. Climate change has affected us greatly, especially this past winter. Not a lot of capacity, and very expensive to move goods in and out, especially when all those communities need winter roads to get fuel into them to burn. Go ahead. So there's all kinds of mineral exploration, that you hear about, critical minerals in the north. And I think Northwest Territories come into play a lot with that in the last while, and that that is great, except to get to those areas is almost impossible via roads. There is no roads, so that is a huge concern, and I'll talk about what that really means in some areas just in a couple slides. So the future of critical minerals, which is for electric cars and phones and all that, is we've got a lot of opportunity, not a lot of dollars to spend on getting it out of there. Go ahead. So we did build a road from Highway 3, which is the road into Yellowknife, up to a community. That's a dotted line and the road on the right map, and it's pointed, the arrow points to it. It was a 97-kilometer road for about $250 million to build. When I say highway, it's called the Cleacho Highway now. It is a 2-lane gravel road, basically. And this was a P3 project. And without being a P3 project, I don't think it would have ever gotten off the ground as far as funding goes, based on the amount that was there. Go ahead. So here's some, just some stats around it and what that looks like in the area. But it was again, our partner Keynote, working with us and with the Cleacho government and the GNWT. So all of that is, a hugely important part. And we have a couple of other projects, one being underway right now, the Frank Channel Bridge, which I mentioned, which goes right over one of the communities. And the other is a Slave Geological Road, which goes out to diamond mines and critical mineral area, which is a $2 billion project. Where does the GNWT ever get $2 billion to do that? So go ahead. I wanted to talk the third area, which is internet backbone. For those who are so used to, and I'm sure in the room you're sitting in right now, the internet is not even a second thought. And when you land in Yellowknife, it's not too bad. You go to a community and some areas where the internet is 1/1000th the speed of it in Yellowknife, and Yellowknife is not fantastic speed. So to do things like set up on-the-job training, or even over internet training, or setting up a digital economy, which I would love to do with the youth in the communities. The problem is getting internet in there. So we've started some projects, and you want to jump ahead? We've started some projects that we've put a fiber line in along that highway that we built. We ran a fiber line last year into Watsi, which is the second biggest community. And then we are putting remote satellites into the Gamity and Wekwati. And just recently, and I will say in the fall, we had coverage where the satellites were able to provide steady coverage for some of the coverage, like Starlink as an example. So go ahead. So, and this is kind of the last slide, which is what's the future? We've got critical minerals, hugely important for economy, security issues. You see where the north, and that will drive a lot of things. It has driven things in the past. Costs are tremendously high everywhere. Imagine how high it is when you're talking, it's a 14-hour drive north of Edmonton just to get to Yellowknife. And then where do you go from there, where everything has to be remote transport in? And where does funding come from? Governments, Canadian government, P3 funding. So those are all hugely important as far as infrastructure goes. I think that kind of covers what my intro.
Mark, thank you very much. That is such a fascinating story that you have to tell, and it's a new story for a lot of the people in this room. It's really incredible what you are doing up in such a remote area, but one that is so important not only to your own First Nations, but to the future of Canada and the United States. I'm now going to turn to Andrew. Sure. And you want to speak from the podium, that's fine. By way of introducing Andrew, I want to tell you that he is one of the most important persons to me. He was critically important to my being appointed to the Surface Transportation Board, because at the time he was working with the vice chairman of the Commerce Committee, and the Commerce Committee is the one committee of the Senate that has to approve and forward to the full Senate nominees to the Surface Transportation Board. And Roger Wicker, Senator Wicker was the vice chairman of that committee, and he said the most wonderful things about me. I can't tell you. It was so wonderful that nobody asked me any questions. I was sitting next to Jennifer Homendy. Jennifer was being nominated for the National Transportation Safety Board, and she got all the questions. I didn't get any. So, Andrew, thank you so very much.
Yeah, it's always nice to have other nominees up there during a confirmation process to distract members from asking you questions. So good for you. Yeah, so good morning, everybody. Andrew Neely with WSP. I'm based out of our Washington, D.C. office. I run our federal government affairs portfolio, and prior to joining WSP, as it was mentioned earlier, I spent about 10 years working in the U.S. Senate on a couple different key transportation and infrastructure committees. Most recently for the U.S. Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, where I had the privilege to be an author and negotiator during the bipartisan infrastructure law, specifically on intercity passenger rail, freight, maritime, ports, safety, research and innovation programs and policies. And I'm excited today to talk to you about the importance of infrastructure investment and the direct impact that can have on the economy in regions like the Pacific Northwest, and then the importance of local match and how without it, none of those investments would really be possible. Yeah, so Congress and the Biden administration really recognize this importance of infrastructure investment with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, more commonly referred to as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. If you hear either of those terms, they're interchangeable. I'll be mostly using BIL today. So yeah, we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary this November of the infrastructure law, so we're fully into implementation phase at the various different agencies responsible. The infrastructure law provided roughly $1 trillion investment in a wide range of infrastructure assets, the typical surface transportation programs, highways, transit, rail, but it also included a wider set, ports, aviation, broadband, energy and climate, resilience, drinking and wastewater. I think it really recognized the connected system that we now live in and the importance of investing in all types of infrastructure. In the most recent White House reporting, we've seen over $222 billion in investments to over 34,000 different projects across the country. Again, that's in the first 2 years, more's to come. For a quick recap of the guaranteed funding in BIL, to back up a bit, the backbone of the infrastructure law is built around the surface transportation reauthorization, which comes across about every 5 or 4 years or so within Congress. And that provides, the typical funding for highway and transit programs through the Highway Trust Fund, but something very unique to the infrastructure law, in addition to being historic levels of funding, is dedicated funding via advanced appropriations, which is a relatively newer concept that Congress has been using in the last couple of years, but it provides guaranteed funding for those wider range of infrastructure assets that I mentioned that aren't typically seen in those surface transportation reauthorizations. So it is a really unique opportunity for state and local governments, tribes, organizations to plan accordingly for the future and take advantage of those federal investments that are in place over the next several years. Another quick recap. This is a general breakdown of the funding that's gone out to date. Nearly 160 billion so far for transportation projects. That includes all types of infrastructure assets within transportation. Coming up on 50 billion for energy, climate, and resilience. Almost 3 billion in broadband. Again, a lot more to come. And here I wanted to provide a quick snapshot of the BIL funding specific to the Pacific Northwest here in the US. Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Alaska. If you haven't checked out the White House's BIL dashboard, highly recommend. It's a great resource to see how the funding's coming in and where it's going. But I think it's important to note that most, if not all, of these investments, federal investments for projects, would not have been possible without local match or the non-federal match. Here's my attempt to try and outline a way of thinking about the local match. First and foremost, it's key to determine the program that you're trying to pursue for a specific project that you might have in mind for your community. When you're looking at federal transportation funding, more commonly or most of the time, you'll find what is the traditional rule of an 80-20 split, where there's a max federal share of 80%, and then at least 20% for non-federal share for the local match. If you're in that category, obviously, it's important to budget, be able to provide that at least 20% mark. It's helpful to identify partners and come up with strategies to help and come up with innovative ways to meet that match. I'll also note too, in some circumstances, there's something called braiding that you can utilize, where there are certain federal programs, other federal grant programs, where you can use those funds received as part of your non-federal share within another program you're currently pursuing. So look out for those opportunities. If you don't fall within that 80-20 split, there are several instances to look out for. You might be, if you're looking at a program, you might be over that 80 or under that 80. A lot of times there are statutory preferences within the programs that create or provide a higher score or weighted differently. If you might say you have to hit the 80% federal share, but they might be looking for something lower, and you'll be scored higher in your application process. Another key thing to always keep an eye out for are flexibilities or relaxed requirements for unique communities. There are a lot of set-asides or lower matches for rural areas, tribes, federal lands, and disadvantaged communities. So those can be great opportunities to help maximize your federal investments. And then in some cases, there are planning programs or planning set-asides within funding opportunities that a lot of the times will be a much higher federal share, sometimes even 100%. So really can set you up for project planning and pre-development phase activities to pursue more funding in the future. Not expecting you to be able to actually see this slide or read this text, but just kind of wanted to show you how important it is to really know the program, because there's hundreds of infrastructure programs across various different federal agencies with varying matching requirements and flexibilities and set-asides. It can be complicated to navigate, but there's a lot of tools available within USDOT or other agencies. So again, knowing the program is key. Again, a lot of text here, but I did want to zoom in on discretionary grant funding available at the Federal Railroad Administration. I know you've heard from them yesterday, and we'll hear more about rail today, but wanted to really highlight that column in blue on matching requirements. Of the 7 rail programs listed here, 4 of them fall within that 80-20 split that I mentioned, but there are some preferences to come up with a lower match, a higher local match. Of the 3 remaining programs at the bottom, those fall outside of the 80-20 split. They have varying levels of federal match. Some of them are on sliding scales where you might receive 100% in the beginning of the process or at the front end of the project, but later you'll have to come up with a higher local match towards the end of the process. And I just wanted to end here to kind of show the experience and expertise at WSP. It can be complicated to navigate the federal opportunity process as well as come up with that local match. But over the last 15 years, WSP has provided nearly $35 billion in federal grants and loans for over 270 projects. So happy to talk with anyone after this if you want to learn more. And that concludes my introductory remarks. Really appreciate it and looking forward to talking more.
Andrew, thank you so much for that excellent roadmap to how to set yourselves up to be successful at getting money out of the federal government. And I would just share that from my experience at FRA during the Obama administration, the local commitment was very, very important. And when we were putting out high-speed rail money, the reason that so much money went to the state of California, which has now got a high-speed train under construction, well underway. People don't know that, but it's true. It's because their match was 50%, and that beat everybody else out. So it's that local commitment is very important. And if you don't have the cash, there's all kinds of other in-kind things you can do. And also political support's very important. I remember Ray LaHood, when he'd get a couple of different applications from one state, he'd call up the governor and he'd say, what's your priority? So keep that in mind as well. I want to kick this off, Mark, with a question for you. You mentioned that you are very reliant on money from the federal Canadian government. You've got a lot of resources up there that are just begging to be exploited. How does 43,000 people manage to get major investments from the government of Canada?
Well, that's the question, and it's a very good question. It is it is an important piece of what we have to do for every project. So here's where the CLECHO self-government helps, because for certain items, and we're talking a lot of different infrastructure. You brought up the critical minerals piece is probably the one that is the shining star right now as far as what are people looking to fund or potentially helping to fund. But with all the infrastructure, there are opportunities to go to the federal government and say either the CLECHO government goes directly or goes through the GNWT, the government of the Northwest Territories. But it's a partnership that has to happen. There's not the money in the GNWT for that focus. And like I had said about the CLECHO highway that was built, sometimes we'll look for certain, thinking outside the box, innovative ways of being able to pay for items, like a P3 partnership, which until we did that road, I didn't really truly understand what that meant, but it did help a lot. It helped with not only the funding that the federal government was willing to put out, but also it helped the GNWT being able to spread cost over a number of years. And for us, it's not our partner owns the or a combination of our partner and the CLECHO government owns the operation and maintenance of that road for the next 25 years, but we're doing the work, the CLECHO Investment Corporation. So there's lots of opportunity with the government. The challenge is, again, with 43,000 people or 48,000 people in the territory, with most of the population, 80% of the population is within 200 kilometers of the US border. People in the South do not, in the Southern Canada, do not understand the importance of the North. And it is a very challenging time to be able to explain that. And that's where things like critical mineral strategies for the country and region come into play. So that those are the kind of items that certainly become important. Certainly, if you mention the word security and what the, we are obviously right in the Arctic Ocean, and what does that mean from a Russia-China point of view, that type of scenario for people, then their ears may perk up a little bit more. But without that Southern support, out of 280 people in the House of Commons, there's one who represents Northwest Territories. So that, it's not like you can garner a lot of votes. So it is a challenge every day to be able to say, what does this mean to us? And being able to get a study done, to pay for a study to be able to do infrastructure is even a difficult task. So it certainly makes us have to think and work hard to be able to even garner the funding to do the work, then do the work on top of that.
Mark, thank you so much. By the way, there was recently, an article, and I can't remember if it was in Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal, talking about security issues relating to the Arctic. And one of the things they did is they showed a map that looks at the world from the north. And when you see the Arctic and it being surrounded by Canada and Alaska and Russia and Sweden, Norway, it gives you a totally different perspective. And the Arctic is now, the sea lanes are open for much of the year. And we do know the Russians are very, very focused on exploiting and taking control of that area. So Mark's got a very, very important message to take to Ottawa. You got to pay attention to us because we got those balloons, coming over. We know about the balloons. In the United States, is there a national security hook for infrastructure development?
Certainly, there is. I mean, even if you look at the creation of the highway system, that came with a national security purpose in mind when President Eisenhower was building out the highway system. I think the national security concerns really came to light a little bit too during the supply chain disruptions for COVID, or as a result of COVID, and the importance of freight movement across this country. The ability to connect our ports to the trucks and the railways to move it into the heartland, and then vice versa for exporting abroad. That is key to our economy, and it's key to our national security. And I think it's recognized in the infrastructure law with a variety of different multimodal and freight applications to provide investments for connecting our economy.
Give you just an example of something that came up before the board last week that we were made aware of. Boeing ships fuselages on rail cars to the east. That bridge going down created a problem. Stop the train, put these fuselages on trucks, I guess, and get them around and get them on their way. It's the kind of thing you don't think about very often. And I know when we were having service problems, significant service problems in the rail industry when I first joined the board a year and a half ago. One of our staffers said something to me that I found utterly chilling. And he said, if we wound up with a war in Europe and a war in China at the same time, would our rail system be able to handle the amount of movement of war material back and forth. Serious, serious question. So let me ask you this. There's a lot of competition for the money, and 9 out of 10 applications aren't going to get any. What do you say to applicants who don't get it first time around?
Really good question. Yes, the federal opportunities are highly competitive. They're overly subscribed. Bets had mentioned winning a RAISE grant. That's a great example. That can be a very tough program to compete for. But one of the benefits that I mentioned in my opening remarks is the guaranteed funding within the infrastructure law. You can rely upon consistent funding on an annual basis through the formula allocations and the various different discretionary grant programs that come online. So if you're not successful in one round, highly encourage folks to reapply, and before doing so, be sure to request debriefs from the relevant federal agency or department to best prepare yourself for the next round. And I would highly encourage folks to loop in your congressional delegation in DC to even help with that process. Maybe even have them request the debrief or be a part of it. That really kind of builds in an engagement with your congressional support heading into the next round, and keeps them informed going into the process, and can really set you up for the next round. And Karen, to your point, there's a lot of grants that come in for one state or several grants for even a district, and USDOT is not always sure how to navigate that, and so they'll call up a governor or a senator, like, what do you really want here? So making sure you do have that congressional support in place is key.
Right. Even if they didn't support the bill.
Even if they didn't. Members like showing up for ribbon cutting events, so happy to take credit always.
Mark, I have another question for you. One of the issues that has become very, very important in the infrastructure world is building in resiliency. How are we going to build projects that will be able to withstand climate change? It was mentioned that I have, I'm not exactly bi-coastal. I live in Colorado, which has its weather challenges. Happily, when it snows a lot, we're really keen about that. But in Brooklyn, I live right across the river from where they are building a 12-foot, maybe it's 20 feet ultimately, wall along the East River to keep the Lower East Side from being flooded in the next hurricane. There have been proposals to build a wall all the way around Manhattan. I don't think that's going anywhere. Better idea may be to just build some gates out in the out in New York Harbor near the Verrazano Narrows. Again, a multi-billion-dollar project. But Mark, you deal with a difficult climate on a daily basis. So how do you do it? How do you make resilient projects up in your area?
Well, it's interesting because, again, I'll go back to the highway we built. So there's a little item that happens up north, which is a thing called permafrost, which for those who are in the north know and know what the effect of that can be. And permafrost used to be more permanent, as it were. So for those who, in the news, especially in Canada, but the road that was built out to Tuktoyaktuk, to the Arctic Ocean a number of years ago, huge project, was built across a lot of area of permafrost, as an example. That road has gone through a lot of issues now because the permafrost is for lack of a better word, melting. And the climate change is causing that. So everything, and in fact, Tuck, the town of Tuck, the conversation is about moving the town away from the Arctic Ocean a little bit because of the climate change and the rising water. So when we do things like the Clecho Highway that we just built, we have to build it we have to design it in a way that is we design a 75-year road. You have to take all of that into account. And what does that mean? That's a huge extra cost involved, because for those who've been on the road to Yellowknife up from Edmonton, it's a 14-hour drive from Edmonton up to Yellowknife. When you make the turn on the north side of Great Slave Lake, you come across that highway. It is a roller coaster in the summertime because there is areas that there's permafrost that's melted and sinking of the road, and there's a lot of repairs that are done. So, and I'm not saying that road wasn't built well when it was. I think it was built fine for when it was put in, but a lot's changed. So when we look at things like that, and that's, part of the, or at least some of the reason why rail hasn't gone up, or pipelines, because of those changing of the climate as well. So there's a lot that has to be taken into account up north. Never mind the fact that, the summer season of construction is literally, 4 months long. And most of the rest of the season, 4 months, is at somewhere around -40, -50 degrees. So that's also part of, not only the conditions of during construction, but how the design has to be done. I mean, it's a lot of care has to be taken into what goes in that, because of things like certainly on climate change, things like permafrost changing very rapidly. So yeah, absolutely, it's a concern, and it goes into extra amount of dollars into design, extra amount of dollars into construction, and again into areas that are not are really remote.
Thank you very much. And at the STB, when we're having service problems, particularly in the winter, the Class 1 railroads will come to us and say, oh, we had snow, we had frost heaves. Frost heaves are, this is, something that I think you're alluding to. The earth, it actually goes up and down, and it wreaks havoc with rail lines, and snow is a problem. We had a lot of snow in California this year, and the trains couldn't get across the Donner Pass. Well named. But our chairman, Marty Oberman, looks at when the railroads tell him this, he says, wait a minute, doesn't it snow every year? Well, what do you mean you're not prepared for snow? Well, they are. They've got big snow plows and all the rest. But we do have to build more resiliency into our infrastructure. Let me ask you another question, a little Washington oriented. We have a president who is very fond of railroads. He's called Mr. Amtrak. He used to take Amtrak up and down to Delaware and back every day for years. But he's kind of focused on the Northeast Corridor, and we got a lot of money going into the Northeast Corridor. We have a lot of money going into building a new tunnel under the Hudson River. The existing tunnel's over 100 years old, and it got flooded during Sandy. The result of that is that the salt water got in, and it is still eating at the concrete to this day. Terrible thing to happen to a tunnel. So we got to build a new tunnel before we lose the old one. That's billions of dollars. We need a new tunnel in Baltimore, another couple of $1 billion. A lot of focus on the Northeast Corridor. How do folks in the Northwest compete against that?
It's a really good question. Something Congress regularly debates about when we come across these surface transportation bills every 4 or 5 years. And there's always a tension between Northeast members and the rest of the country on the national network. I'll note that the infrastructure law provided $66 billion for freight and passenger rail. The vast majority of that meant for passenger rail. And that's just the minimum amount. The annual appropriations process are also fulfilling higher amounts with the authorized levels. But if you take a look, I mean, there was a big push from members across the national network outside of the NEC to make sure there's opportunities available to reestablish service, to provide city pairs and availability, for regions like the Pacific Northwest. Even if you take a look at, zoom in on that $66 billion in the infrastructure law, $22 billion of it is for annual Amtrak grants. There's a direct money to Amtrak. Over 70% of that is for the national network. The remaining is for the Northeast corridor. But I think that's a good example of the priority that was placed by Congress and the president for the rest of the country as well, and opportunities there. And I'll say in my time in Congress and working for the Commerce Committee, I work for a conservative member at one point. You know him well, Senator Wicker, you mentioned him, but he's an advocate for passenger rail.
Yes, he is.
And he's and part of your resiliency question, he's been pushing to restore service along the Gulf Coast between Mobile and New Orleans that passes through Mississippi. And members like that, in projects that are so important and could have a huge economic impact to their area, really push for additional funding in the infrastructure law. And on top of it, that service was really damaged with the Hurricane Katrina. 16 years later, it's still really not up and running. With conservative members, they might not be as resonant to hear things like climate change, but talking to them in terms about resiliency, about building infrastructure that can last and withstand weather events, that's key. It still gets the same end goal, but it's about framing it correctly with, depending on your audience.
Right, I think that's a very good point. One of the things that the Gulf Coast shares with the Northwest is the problem of how to connect two cities that are relatively close to each other by something other than air. When I was at FRA, I went down to a meeting of the mayors down in the Gulf Coast. We met in Mobile. To get from Mobile to New Orleans, you got to fly through Atlanta. I mean, does that make any sense? And I won't comment on what that does to our air. And you got the same problem up here. I have a client, wonderful client in Boise I'm going to see this afternoon, and they had a couple of plants, power plants they were building in Montana. To get from Boise to Billings, not that far. You have to fly through Salt Lake or Denver. I can't tell you how many hours we spent. We'd have meetings in the United Club at the Salt Lake City airport because that was the best place to meet. We need to, this is why we need to bring back rail, back to the future. And we're going to be talking more about that, obviously, for the next 2 days. We got only a couple of minutes left, I'm told. Is that right? And I want to turn to a question from the audience. As we implemented these federal funding programs, we ran into local and state barriers. What are some of the biggest barriers you ran into when implementing with local organizations? I'm not sure who that is really, that question is aimed at, but let me just start off. And then one of the problems you have is that local organizations don't really understand how to deal with federal bureaucracies. It's not the deep state. They really are there to help you. But if you've never gone through that process, the learning curve's pretty high. So how would you advise local communities to get up to speed on how to approach the folks at the Federal Railroad Administration or EPA or the federal highways? It's kind of daunting.
It certainly is daunting. I've already said it already, but engaging with your congressional delegation up in DC is always a great tool. At least finding the ones that will engage with you to help navigate that process and apply some pressure to the relevant federal agencies is always helpful. And then, I think a lot of it also comes down to scheduling and timing. With the infrastructure law now in place, there are so many different funding programs coming online really on a weekly basis, but they're coming online every year. So planning for the future over the next 3, 4 years, 5 years, understanding when those opportunities are going to become available, and being well positioned to take advantage of them. Maybe this year is not the right year to apply for this certain program, and you'll have a better shot going for a different one, but knowing that you'll come back to it later. Don't just look at it in a vacuum. Really think about this infrastructure law and the opportunities included over a long-term basis, and approaching it from that kind of perspective.
Is there anyone in the room here with a burning question? Great, the question he asked is what our agenda is. Passenger preference or rather the preference for passenger trains over freight that was actually written into the law years ago. We have initiated, and I'll talk about this maybe in the next panel, our first investigation of on-time performance of Amtrak. And that was announced last week, and I'll talk about that some more. Common carrier obligation. It's in the law. It says that railroads are responsible to provide service on reasonable demand. Well, what does that mean? We've just issued an order against a Class 1 railroad because we didn't think that they were meeting that obligation to provide reasonable service to a coal company in Montana. And so there's legislation that has been introduced that would flesh out a little bit more about what the common carrier obligation means. And it's a really important issue because our freight railroad system, other than the short lines, but the Class 1 railroads really haven't grown in the last 10 years. They're making more money, but doing less. But they have new leadership. Most of the railroads now have new leadership, and they are looking forward, and they are trying to grow, and they are hiring a lot more people. Things, in fact, are getting better. What we're all crossing our fingers is that we don't have a recession that causes them to furlough people who won't come back to work when they call them back, and that's what happened the last time. So that's an issue that we are keeping a really close eye on. So with that, I want to thank Mark. Really just an amazing story that you have to tell. And the next time I talk to my friends at Canadian National, I'm going to tell them they got to get that railroad from the south of the lake up to Yellowknife. And Andrew, thank you again so much. It was so great to get to know you during the confirmation process, and I'm so glad that you have taken up the helm at my old my old engineering firm, WSB. I quit practicing law at one point because the deputy secretary that I served under was at WSB, and he said, Karen, what do you want to do? You really want to build something, come work for us. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And,
It's
thank
been
you
great
very
talking with you
much.
as well.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. We'll continue this in our next panel. A great discussion, thanks so much. And I'd like to call up Senator Winder for a special presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, panel, for talking about those very critical issues. We're hoping to see rail reestablished for passengers in my lifetime. So we'd like to see it in the next year or two, if that's possible. So I've been asked to present a special award this morning because I talked to Matt and said, I think we need a Spirit of Pinware Award. We need an award that honors those that are dedicated to Pinware, that go above and beyond the call of duty, that have a real passion for it. And Matt said, that's really a good idea. So we're going to present the first one this morning, and I hope that the future presidents will do the same. This is someone that's really cared about the goals and objectives. You've heard about them as we've talked about what Pinware is about, and trying to get people from different political persuasions, different geographical locations to talk about regional and common solutions for our problems, because we are the breadbasket of the world. We are the energy source really for our world. And this particular individual has more than exemplified that. Before and after COVID, this individual has given their heart, soul to the goals and objectives of Pinware. And it's my honor to present the first Spirit of Pinware Award to former President Mike Cuff. Come on up, Mike. We know you love people. We know you love Pinware. You've been a great president in the past. And so we just thought this would be a way of sharing with you some of the key people that have touched your life and have touched mine. And they've hopefully they know you and love you. And so this is from all the people at Pinware. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. You're welcome, sir.
I know this is hard to believe, but I'm speechless.
Okay, thank you.
But I appreciate it very much. It means a whole lot. Pinware means a whole lot. Pinware is able to accomplish so many great things, and they have. We have so many good past presidents here. Thank you, Chuck. You've been great. You've put on a tremendous program here. And I want to give a shout out to one of the guys who really is the real spirit, I think. Brandon Hardenbrook. Stand up, Brandon. Brandon here, he's out doing some work someplace probably. Back in the back. Brandon, Matt steps up. Matt's a tremendous organizer, leader, inspire. Brandon gets a heck of a lot done, and I'm so proud of him. So thank you, Chuck. I'm proud of the job you did.
Thank you, Mike.
Proud of Matt, too.
Congratulations.
Okay, now I would like to invite up our former presidents from Idaho, Max Black and George Eskridge, to so we are presenting an award to our president, Chuck Winder, as he, what, you want to read it, what it says?
It's backwards. No sense of humor, man.
In grateful appreciation of your outstanding leadership as Pinware's 24th president. How are we done? Senator Chuck Winder, Idaho, President of the Pacific Northwest Economic Region, 2022, 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you. Congratulations.
All right.
Are we done? Yeah, you're done. Anyway, thank you for this wonderful award. It's been a real honor to be president. The official passing of the guard will occur right after lunch today when I pass the gavel to the new incoming president. But I just wanted to take a minute and just again thank all the staff. Gloria, thank you for all your help you've given us to the Idaho Council and the Idaho members of PNWR, and a special shout out to my wife, Diane, who supported me in so many, many ways. And as I teasingly said to the governor, that he really married up, I really married up too. She's been a wonderful blessing in my life. We just had 55 years of marriage. All I can say about her, she's a very patient woman. And thank you, hon. Thanks, everybody.
All right, terrific. Well, we're going to move on to our morning sessions. I'd like to again thank the city of Boise for helping us host this Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit. After a short break at 9:30, we will have the Greater Northwest Passenger Rail Summit in room 100C, which is just past that air wall. There will also be a special session on river generation hydrokinetic power systems. And this will be a demonstration of the longest lasting, or longest continuous duration of a tidal generation technology that's in the far north of Alaska, in Igigik, Alaska, powering 700 families for 4 years underneath the river. Continuous base load power. So that's in our Arctic Council, Arctic Caucus session in 100D and E, which is over that way. We will also have a session on digital and behavioral health services, looking at how do we deliver health services in remote areas and the importance of behavioral health, very important issue in 120C. And then there will be technical assistance and demonstration sessions on feral swine. So we're covering the gamut this morning. And that will be in 1:30, where we have the feral swine yesterday. And following those sessions, which start at 9:30, again at 10:45, the Better Together Moving People and Freight on the Same Tracks will continue in room 100C, a broadband session in room 100D and E, and then our lunch will be back here at 12:15. Really important, Senator Winder's entire initiative for PNWR has been looking at energy security and sustainability, food security and sustainability, and looking at critical minerals that we need for the energy security and sustainability. All of them culminate in how do we get permits done. So the lunch, the keynote luncheon speakers will be talking about permits and how do we do permit reform, more than permit reform, permit modernization. And that relates to all of these issues: transportation, critical mining, and energy. So we'll take a short break. I also wanted to say, if you're signed up for a policy tour, at 2 o'clock, our buses will be lined up on Front Street, and we're going to ask you to check in at the registration desk in the foyer. And at 2 o'clock, those buses will take off after the lunch. So with that, a break till 9:30. We'll have great sessions this morning. Thank you.